Hi, I'm Paul Warren,
And I'm Ryan Klein.
and this is another episode of SEO's Dead and Other Lies. Ryan, how are you doing today? It's
I'm doing well. It's really hot. It's a Saturday, but it is pretty nice
pretty gross out.
for
It's
now.
very humid and very overcast here in Florida. So we're in the throes of summer
You got the
where
best of
it's,
all worlds.
yeah, it's somehow wet, rainy, yet still really hot all at the same time. So great times to be alive. It's actually a really great time to be inside and doing a podcast.
I'd agree. Here we are. I'm ready.
So I think we got a really interesting episode. I say that every episode because we don't do any boring episodes, but this is interesting to us because it's something that we deal with pretty regularly. And it's almost, I think, cathartic for us to talk about it in a way. And that's managing client expectation for SEO campaigns. So whatever type of SEO campaign that you're doing, how do you manage expectations? How do you manage it over a short period of time? Like say maybe a 30 day, 60 day, 90 day. And then how do you manage it over like multiple years, right? And so that's something that we just deal with and face all the time.
Yep. And I think that even if we've covered this topic, maybe, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, it is especially um, interesting, the conversations that are happening nowadays. There's always shifts in industries. I think that there's different expectations of the scope of work and maybe even what people are paying now that everyone thinks AI took over everything. So this is irrelevant. If we've heard this or covered parts of this before, this is a complete revamp because there's a whole revamp in expectations from the average company.
So let's talk about where the expectations really start. And that's with sales.
Sure.
Often, expectations that are set by sales don't match with reality. I've found. I don't know if there's anything you can do to really fix that because, like, honestly, a sales dude's gonna do what
Oh, that's how you fix
a
it.
salesperson's gonna do what a
That's
salesperson
what
gonna
you
do.
got to do. You got to smack them straight. Salespeople might get desperate and make promises and guarantees, but you got to nip that early on.
Yeah, so
That's just biz dev 101
they'll,
management.
they'll definitely take on clients that you just shouldn't even have as a client. Like maybe it just isn't a good fit. What you do, like not everyone needs SEO for their type of business, like for sure. And but you can't tell a salesperson that it's just not gonna
Well,
happen.
what have we turned down in the past year or so? Acai bowls? No, we were gonna do that.
No, we would have done it. I didn't want to do it.
Kids, Ninja Warrior gym? No, we would have done that too.
Well, I actually think that one would. I didn't want to do the medical marijuana. What was that? It
Oh,
was
the telemedicine?
telemedicine for
That was
medical
that was
marijuana.
a disaster.
Yeah. So there's lots of different. I think there's things like I don't know, like bridge construction or something like that. Like things like that
Like
come
not like
in.
a dental bridge, like a physical
No, like a
bridge.
physical, like stuff like that. That comes in from time to time. But without divulging too much about our clients, I think, really that's where the very start of the expectations comes from, is setting what's possible. Is this really like a good thing for your business? It isn't always like going to work for every type of business. I back a long, long time ago, I took on a client that just did it was like a staffing firm, right? So they were headhunters for applicants, but they were in like the simulation and gaming industry, right? So they
Oh
had like
yeah.
the most niche thing ever that there really isn't a lot of people. And I don't think that like doing SEO and doing blog posts and stuff was really a good utilization of their budget and time. And they really should have just spent it like going through LinkedIn or whatever and trying to find people and just doing it the old fashioned way.
One thing I was thinking of right now too is that for biz dev, let's say you're bringing on a salesperson, let's say someone's just really excited about the prospect of selling, but that's not the industry you either serve or necessarily is going to benefit from your product. I feel like you have to show people firsthand what it's like to F up, I guess. And then like it's kind of a told you so without being smug about it. So for example, having a biz dev person on the team and they're getting ramped up and they need a couple wins, they need a couple softball throws to really get some momentum. and we had, laundry delivery service, and we saw where they were located, and we saw what their business model was, and it's like there's about a 0% chance it's going to work, and then they push for it, and it's like we're going to do it, but when it doesn't work, then we're not going to have this conversation ever again.
Yeah.
And guess what? Then after that, they say you start hearing a business dev and sales saying they're not a good fit, and you go, thank you. Now you know
Yeah,
what it's like.
so you have to sort of get through the frustration and annoyance of that for them to get it. And it's a real shame that you can't just assign them the work to do and the reporting on it. But I think ultimately that there are sometimes like they're having those conversations with the client that are the really difficult ones after like whatever amount of time has happened and they're
It's
not
like you
seeing
was
more
signed up for
sales.
it. It's like,
Yeah.
do you want to be on that call when this isn't working because it wasn't going to work in the first place? No, you want to be able to
Yeah.
have a campaign where it's as highest likely to being successful in the first place.
So I think we gave you a general idea of, how to set the initial expectation of like, is this going to work for you? Right. And you just kind of have to know what types of businesses are are there for search, right? That are going to generate sales and revenue through search. And there's just a lot of them that don't. I mean, there's way more that do, which is why Google makes so much money. But so it really starts with those initial conversations. But let's say you've moved past that and they've signed up, they're a client now. How do you set expectations for the work being done, Ryan?
So there's this really handy tool, and I've done things in the past that have been more like anecdotal. It even goes back to like 10 years ago. How long does it take to rank for my main keywords, secondary, tertiary keywords? And it's like, the low hanging fruit, 3 to 6 months, medium competition, 6 to 12 months, more competition, 13, 18. You kind of have like these arbitrary ranges. And more or less, if the window is broad enough and you're proactive, you can pretty much like hit it at certain points. But even in the past couple of weeks, I wanted more data, right? I wanted to base it off of actually like trends that I saw. So I actually use SEMrush's like historical data for some rankings, and I was looking, for example, someone's ranking. You weren't on that workshop yesterday, were you?
No,
Okay, I recorded it.
wasn't.
You can watch it later if
Okay.
you want.
Was it a good
Don't worry
one?
about it if you
Was it
don't
a
want.
good one?
I did it, so
Oh,
maybe it was okay.
yeah.
5 out of 10. Um, and so the person is number one for Boca Personal Jeweler, and I'm thinking, well, wouldn't it be nice to know like how long it took them to get there so I can like base it off of those trends? And so you can use historical data and then look at 6 months, 12 months back where they were at. And then there's even like a graph. I can't think off the top of my head the steps to get there, but it basically showed that they're number one now. They got there 2 months ago, but 6 months ago they were 10. And then a year before that they were 40. And a year before that they didn't exist. So you can kind of look at these things and say if they were gunning for this keyword, it took them about 2.5 years to really hit one.
That's
And
a long
based off
time.
that,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be that long, but it just tells a story because like let's say our client says it's been a year and we've gone from 0 to 14 and I want to leave. And I'm at the top of the second page because I wanted to be in the top, the first page after a year. And you go,
Yeah.
well, let's look at 5 other clients that you know and respect in your area. How long did it take them to even get there? And then it might change the narrative completely if they go, dang, every single person, it took them 2 years. And it's like, yeah, we actually got there in 1 year. And it normally took them 2 or a year and a half. It
That's
might
pretty
go from
good.
it might go from them being like really negative about how things are going to being maybe super appreciative about how much faster it is relative to their competition. So that's about expectation is like using as much data as possible to show, how long or how much effort it takes to get from point A to point B.
So really, you're starting with competitive data, but for competitors, they know.
Especially if they know them. They're like,
Yeah.
I know that guy that's like the top dog, and I didn't know that they were number 30, you
Yeah.
know, 3 years ago. I thought they were always number one. It's like, well, you're always looking this in like a finite, you know, scope.
Yeah. So I know for local, I kind of have a blanketed number, a range that you generally can get it done in that range, no matter what the industry is. And it's really sort of the beauty of local is it's a lot more uniform of how it works, like in the results that you can get, regardless of the niche that you're in, right? So it's,
Hmm.
like organic for personal injury lawyer or something like that is very, 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 very competitive. And it's like, do you have like, are you getting links? There's all this other stuff that kind of a large
Sure.
budget can go into it, but there's only so much budget that you can throw at local and get like a return on it.
Well, sometimes you have to let the work kind of pan out, right? Especially with
Yeah.
SEO and links and on-site optimizations. You can't like fast track everything all the time.
Yeah. So I have a set time frame, but it assumes a lot of things that aren't necessarily what happened. And I think part of what I have to do going forward is sort of change that expectation of like this is a best case scenario is like 6 months, right? So that's like you're getting reviews, your website isn't terrible, you have some local rankings for these keywords that you want to rank for, right? There isn't some sort of dev nightmare where your website's being hosted with some other company and you can't edit anything, or like you're in a contract dispute with them. There's like a million different things like that. Um, and so setting, I think there's a portion of it that you have to set expectations that my work can be affected by these other things. And right, so this is like the timeline, assuming like everything else is golden, right? And we have
Mhm.
like solutions in place.
Well, that's what expectations are. It's being like cognizant and transparent about the different factors that contribute to where they are at any point in time. And this like might get a little philosophical, and this is kind of coming piggybacking off the conversation I had with the team for 45 minutes yesterday. But there's like the duration expectations, like how long is this going to take and what's reasonable just for like this level of effort, but then also being acknowledging like the progress along the way, not just looking at like snapshots throughout time. Then there's competition. It's always been relative to competition. Then it's what you're talking about, other factors. Like I was even talking about macroeconomic factors, such as like I'm doing marketing in Detroit, and how come the traffic is down 10% every year? It's like because 10% of the population is leaving every year. Like I know that's a little extreme case, but
Hey, Detroit's
even
back, baby. It's
even
coming
if
back.
even if there are less people that live there, like you even have to be considerate of like traffic
Yeah,
and trends.
I mean we have clients in the moving space, and do you know what hasn't happened a lot over the past 3 years? People
Moving cross
buying people
country.
buying houses
Oh
because
well,
it's
yeah.
been very, very cost prohibitive to buy a house right now from an interest rate standpoint. So they're
Hmm.
like, I'm not doing as much business. Well,
Or
not less people moving.
downsizing. I'm not doing
Yeah.
as big of moves because everyone's like, you know,
Yeah.
they're moving from a 4-3 to a 2-1, which sounds horrific. So hopefully not
Ugh.
that significant. But
Yeah, so I guess what I want to say is right there, there's a lot of things that can affect the outcome of your work that you have absolutely no control over in any capacity. And like that's probably the number one obstacle I have when getting things done is like there's someone else that I need to do something. And like sometimes it's the client, and you can send a million emails for them to do the thing, and you can bring it up on every meeting and they still don't do the thing after months and months, right? And like that might be the thing that like stops you from getting the rankings, right? Like maybe you don't have access to their listing and you have to rely on them to make an edit, and they just don't do it. And like it's like if you didn't put those services on, we're not going to rank for that thing, right? So
mhm.
um so I think that's a really consistent thing. And if you can explain ahead of time what what the blockers are that aren't you, right? Like as a part of those expectations, if they're not done, you're not going to get the results. I mean, it goes sort of a long way, I think, with clients.
So I completely agree. I think there are things outside of our control, such as that, like on the client side, but things that are within our control are still like providing as much data to support what's happening and what's necessary as possible. So if you do that competitive analysis, for example, and let's say I need A, B, and C, and they don't do it, then do you take the route? Well, your competitors, are doing X, Y, and Z, and you're not. And then does that push them a little further? Like, oh crap, like they did do the thing. I hate that guy. All right, I'm gonna start doing that. Or, do you use data um, that's like very traditional, such as population or demographic data to support it? Like you're pushing for this market, but the population is decreasing year over year over year, and you're just sitting there not taking advantage of the next opportunity. So there's still like that level of responsibility I think that we have, or opportunity to provide the data from other sources to support why things are heading in a certain direction and
Yeah.
tempting those expectations.
And then, so I think that's a good, anytime you can use data for any position that you have, anything that you're trying to show, you want to do that. I think that's just being a good SEO. You sort of have to have that mindset, right? That you've looked at the numbers and you dig through a lot of data and you're able to prove things. I think, let me see what I'm trying to think here. I'm gonna edit this. So that's good for setting expectations. I think when work's getting started, right? And you're sort of, within I think like a 6-month time frame of doing it. But let's look at something that happens pretty regularly is like, let's say you have a client, you've gotten good results, but you're in year 3 and you're no
Mm-hmm.
longer seeing, 100% growth year over year, right? Or 300% growth year over year. You're no longer seeing those gaudy numbers that everyone loves seeing because, well, they're doing really well, right? And so how do you manage those expectations when there's not infinite growth?
That this may be the toughest one. This is maybe the one we're dealing with the most because we do have clients with us for 3, 4, 5+ years. And I guess maybe before we go into one prime example, I did want to mention a couple of examples of expectations that I was supporting TLA yesterday, and you
Okay.
weren't on the call, and
Yeah.
you would have seen it, and it was positive. So, still kind of maybe not the 6-month mark, but it's still maybe like the year, right? So, especially with local. So this is very specifically local, share a local voice kind of stuff. And I had one example, right, where someone went from an 80% share a local voice, according to a trend report month over month, 80 to 60, right? 25% reduction. And then you have like the team or maybe even the client that's just like all hands, like, oh my gosh, what a huge reduction. But it's like if you only look month over month and you don't even look at like trend lines or trend reports, you would have seen that 2 months ago it was 60, then it went to 80, which was cool. It was an all-time high. Then it went back to 60, for one reason or another. And then it's like you overreact to that, but yet it's been that way for really the past like 4 or 5 months. And then before that, it was 0. So it's like you can both be hypercritical and ungrateful, and that's just not really a good look, right?
At the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, now you know why I wouldn't go on that meeting. So I
yeah,
just
so
have to
that's
sit there and listen
one
to that.
example. And that's like both managing expectations internally and externally, because of people how they don't always acknowledge positive data, but they react to negative data, and that's a whole other separate conversation. And then we have another client where again, same situation, similar situation, but this is more the long-term one that kind of segues, where let's say drop off 15%, and then it's like, oh shoot, is this going the wrong direction? But then you look, and let's say they have 54% share local voice. You take a step further, not only look at a trend line where it slightly fluctuates, it's like up, down, but mostly trending upwards. You take another step, what I pulled in before, competitive analysis, comparing where you are relative to other people. And they're typically ranking third with 40 reviews. Number one is like 250, 200, 40, 150, 200, and so on. And you have to ask yourself, am I really kicking ass for someone that has like a fifth of the reviews of literally everyone else? And that's expectations. Is that good? Is that
I mean, they're really punching above their weight class, I would say, in that
That's what
scenario,
I'm saying.
right?
It's like, how do you gauge that? Is like, is the local team doing what they're supposed to, or are they doing much better than supposed to because they don't really frankly even deserve to be in the third spot? So they have to be doing something right.
Yeah.
You have to like you have to ask yourself those questions. So the way to segue that and what you mentioned is extremely valid, and I think this is an important conversation for everyone because it's not always the easiest thing to figure out. But when you work with someone for years and you across the board have mostly top 3, lots of number ones, the maps are killing it, and they look at the calls and it starts to plateau. Why is it that they get the impression that you're not providing value any longer? Where's the value at that point?
Yeah, I mean it's just the perpetual like what have you done for me lately attitude, right? And I wish I don't know if we have a solution for that. Because it's something I think everyone just has to deal with from a client perspective. Eventually, uh, they aren't seeing the returns that were there. And I think there is sometimes an expectation of like every month is going to be your best month, right? Like, why was this month not my best month ever? And sometimes like we said, there's a lot of reasons. This is the time of year, it's the market. Um, Google updates lots of things all the time. Sometimes it just there's less of whatever those people are doing in that month, and it doesn't mean anything's wrong, right? But those are a lot of expectations. There's a lot of really high level expectations, and there aren't always an answer to those of why it's not doing as good as the previous month that is like going to suffice, other than like it just isn't. But there's nothing wrong, but it's sort of hard to show people that.
Well, sometimes you can show people like competition, and it can show, well, we plateaued, but your competition's actually kind of declining, and that normally wraps up that
Yeah,
conversation. Then it really starts to become a narrative story driven, using as much data as possible to support it. But what I think makes it the most difficult now than it's been before, as far as like the quote plateau or maintaining. Previously, let's say you have a little bit more of a business savvy client, hopefully, and they go, well, it's okay if we plateaued because my cost per client, or is still 1,000 or 1,500 or whatever the number is. And if they acknowledge that the return on investment is still consistent, that's all that matters, and then you're good. And then you kind of just go from there. They figure that I'm in a competitive market. You must still be doing a lot of work to be able to keep me there where everyone else is trying to usurp my top spots. And that's generally been like the conversation keeps it kind of floating along. But now with AI, there is this expectation that you're maintaining, plus there's AI, which means your job in life must be a little bit easier. So why am I still paying this much? And it's just going to be somewhat of an inflection point, and whether agency or in-house or consulting or whatever, that your SEO must be using some level of AI, and you must be saving some time, and your life must be easier. So why are you charging me the same amount still month over month? It just is going to be that way. And this is a big deal.
yeah. And so, I mean, how do you set those expectations straight for that?
Are you asking me, or is that
Yeah,
like, and everyone has to figure out?
I'm asking you.
I mean, the biggest thing that it is, and it's truthful, is that if of course we have efficiencies, and of course we save time on certain tasks, which enables us to spend more time on other tasks. And I still don't know if that necessarily cuts it, even if that is what is happening.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one, just because I'm not even sure what people's expectations are with AI and how it affects what they should be paying, right? I think it's going to evolve over time, but obviously there are some
Oh,
people
it
that are
is.
like, I should be paying less. So, I mean, I
Well,
guess you could say like, well, do you know how to use AI? Do you know how to create a prompt, that would do this thing? And they probably would say no, because a lot of people don't know how to use like AI effectively at all. And then you could probably just justify paying more, I guess.
I suppose, but the idea of a prompt engineer making like a lot of money is still nauseating to me, because I've
Yeah,
I've seen what they are, and I'm like, okay, it's just like throwing stuff at a wall. I mean, come on.
I get it. Yeah. So,
But
so
I
for
think
for
I still think it's relative to industry too, though. The more an industry is being subjected to the advancements in AI, the more the expectations carry over to their vendors. So, we're working in dental and legal, right? Dental, what's AI going to do for dental? Nothing. What are they going to do? Like, they
answer the
can't do.
phone,
Yeah, is it not?
like you could do like appointments, but that's about it.
Yeah, so it's not really like coming in and saying, oh, open wide and freaking drill your molars for the next hour. But legal, it's getting introduced into their CRM. It's getting introduced to their case management. It's getting prompts. They're beyond boilerplate documentation. I think that the awareness and the implementation in legal is like more present.
Hmm.
That mindset may carry over to expectations of vendors. And that's kind of my point. It's a little speculative, but I mean, we're seeing a lot change in the past 6 months, honestly.
Yeah. So I think the takeaway for having a really long-term client, and then having this conversation where you're having to sort of reset expectations, because they have been successful and they're not happy. I think the only thing you can really do is present as much data as humanly possible. And so that would mean making sure that you have historical data, right? So when you go into like a client relationship, uh, make sure that you can track everything. Make sure that you're using like call tracking numbers and that you have like whatever software it is you have access to see, right? And prove that what you're doing is working. Make sure that you have access to analytics. Make sure that you're tracking things historically from a keyword standpoint, right? So be able to sort of prove the point and show that value that you brought long term. And it's really just about storytelling. And then at that point,
Yeah, I think if there's a major takeaway in addition to providing as much data as possible is I think anyone in SEO, no matter your position, has to be pretty proactive and transparent about like the efficiencies. So if you're working in-house, whoever the report is, you know, how are you using it and how is it saving time and what are you working on with that time? I mean, you wouldn't phase yourself out. That'd be ridiculous. I would never advise that. But, we're already considering more transparency. I think that we did um, provide a lot of information about how we're using AI and how it was enabling us to focus on other projects. But, don't be surprised if you're just saying, we've found more efficiencies and guess what? Your bill is a little cheaper next month. Like it just is. It's just, there might not always be an alternative to that unless you're just highly competitive and you're frankly just doing a lot of work all the time because you don't want to be in a situation where they come to you and say, can't AI just do all this? Like,
yeah,
can't it just do all the work you're doing? You're not talking about it and it's all everyone talks about at this point. So what's your usage? And then on the other side, if you go, well, I'm not saving time and I can't really save money because I'm not using AI, then you're just doing a bad job too. Because it's in every facet of marketing at this point.
yeah, I know at the local agency when we have something that is bad, like let's say a location is not performing how we want, and we've had it for 6 months or something like that. We lead with the bad, like we like launch right into it. We're like, this is what we saw that was wrong. This is like it's been this amount of time. We generally see like results by now. We analyze it again. This is what we think we can do to fix it, and like who needs to help with it. But we don't ever like try and make it seem better than what it is. And so I think kind of like what you're saying with AI, right? Is like if you lead the conversation with it, you kind of do a better job of leading the expectations instead of letting them bring the questions to you.
Yeah. And then even if you're still not confident in everything it does, and this is maybe more like in-house, you wouldn't really have to present this at scale as an agency, but it's like I've tried all these prompts and I've done it for like, analysis and for content and for optimization. And this is why I think it still sucks. Then more power to you. But like you have to be able to get in front of it because
Yeah.
that's where it's going.
All right. Well, I think we covered a lot of stuff in this episode today. So if you're listening and you have clients or really this could be anyone. If you don't have to have clients, you can be working in-house, but you definitely have stakeholders, right? You have people that you got to report to. So just setting expectations in general with everyone is sort of key to success a lot of times in SEO. So hopefully you got some use out of it. I hope you did. And if you're listening, be sure to like, share, and subscribe anywhere that you listen to this podcast at. And if you want to ask Ryan or I a question, you can reach out to us at seosdeadandotherlies@gmail.com. And we love to listen. We love to hear from our readers, and we'd be happy to answer any of your questions or talk about a particular subject in one of our episodes. So with that, I'm Paul Warren.
And I'm Ryan Klein.
And this is another episode of SEO is Dead and Other Lies.
Goodbye.
Bye.